Thank you, Kaya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and sea on which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. The knowledge and custodianship of First Nations communities, especially in managing sea country, must be at the heart of our future ocean conservation efforts. Last week I was in Cairns. We announced $10 million in a new partnership with the Torres Strait Islander and Northern Peninsula area communities on climate resilience. The Albanese government has delivered the first First Nations clean energy strategy, and we've doubled Indigenous ranges because we know how important it is that First Nations knowledge and science is at the heart of what we do on climate and what we do on oceans. I want to thank France's Minister Delegate for the Francophonie and International Partnerships, His Excellency Mr. Tani Mohamed Sawali. It's lovely to spend some time with him today. We believe it might be the first time that ministers from the Australian and French governments have actually met in Western Australia. I find that hard to believe, but if that's true, I'm glad to have been part of that. Lovely to spend some time with you. I do also want to acknowledge Dr. Andrew Forrest, his team at Minderoo, and of course the French Embassy for putting together this important event. And I want to acknowledge that Dr. Andrew Forrest has made a massive contribution to ocean protection. You know, he feels it very deeply. He's been committed to it over a long period of time, and he backs it in, and I really value that. I spent some time with Andrew at the opening of the new Marine Science Centre up at Exmouth a couple of years, and we had a beer actually in Baku last year as part of the climate COP, and I know that it's just something that he's going to keep putting his significant energy and resources behind, and we need that. So thank you, Andrew. I also want to acknowledge the Secretary-General, Sanjeev Ranjan, and some of my parliamentary colleagues who are here today, President of the Senate, Sue Lyons, Senator Dean Smith, and the Western Australian Minister for the Environment, Matthew Swinburne, representing the Premier of Western Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, I begin by emphasising Australia's appreciation for France's leadership on global oceans policy, including through its hosting of the third United Nations Oceans Conference, UNOC 3, in just a couple of months' time. You know, Australia and France share an enduring partnership, both globally and as neighbours in the Indo-Pacific, and we're committed to building our cooperation to ensure a peaceful, stable, prosperous and healthy region at a difficult time. It's a privilege for me to be here with you representing the Australian government at this event. It's actually quite nice to take a little bit of time out of what's otherwise a busy campaign trail. You know, when your team says you don't have to be at a train station at 6:45 handing out flyers because you need to iron a shirt and come to UWA, where I was fortunate to study some time ago and where two of my kids are studying now. It's not a bad piece of news. But I'm here to emphasise the Albanese Labor government's commitment to ocean conservation and sustainable management in the lead up to that third United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice. And fantastic to get that personal invitation from President Macron. It's pretty hard to turn up. You know, I don't know anyone who wouldn't say, yes, I'd like to come and spend some time in Nice. And hopefully Minister Plibersek will get to do that. It's fitting, in my view, that this event is hosted here in Perth, and that we were welcomed here by Robin Collard this morning. This is the city in which Foreign Minister Penny Wong and Indian Foreign Minister Jai Shankar co-hosted the Indian Ocean Conference, welcoming more than 400 delegates to discuss the positive and practical ways in which we can work towards a peaceful, stable, sustainable and prosperous Indian Ocean that operates according to international rules, norms and standards. I think we've all had a bit of an experience in 2025 so far about how important those norms and standards are, and unfortunately how fragile they can be. It's fitting that the event is hosted in Perth, a city where the connection to the Indian Ocean isn't symbolic. You know, it's physical, it's ubiquitous. The ocean isn't just something we visit, it's something we live alongside. We're sustained and even defined by it, and we feel a deep sense of responsibility and stewardship for. Since my first speech in Parliament representing Fremantle, or Walyalup, and Wodgumup and Walyabut, I've spoken of our city's outward-looking and open character. with strong links into our region and great potential for those links to become stronger still, especially throughout the Indian Ocean. And this forum provides an opportunity to build on those links, and I really welcome that. Today's gathering is more than a local conversation. It's part of a national and global dialogue, one that will lead into and help shape priorities for UNOC 3. Needless to say, that conference will be a critical moment. President Macron described it as a pivotal moment, a decisive moment, and I completely agree. A chance for the world to recommit to protecting our ocean, to restoring what has been damaged, and to setting new ambition for what we can achieve together when, as Dr. Forrest points out, time is very short. So I want to take this opportunity to highlight a range of momentous shifts in the cause of ocean protection that have been delivered in less than 3 years by the Albanese government. But first, I note I don't know if it's quite breaking news, it depends on how much people have been looking at their phones, but earlier today, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced that under a re-elected Labor government, we're going to set up a new 10 million reef educational experience fund to protect and promote the Great Barrier Reef. You know, it's been the case for a long time that Australian kids from schools around Australia can get support to go to the national capital and go to Parliament House and the Australian War Memorial and some of those important sites. We want to ensure that our young people can experience the beauty of the Great Barrier Reef, while also learning about the important role it plays in our marine environment. And that new reef program will support $6 million for the Kids for the Reef rebate program to support schools to make excursions to the Great Barrier Reef, both to experience it firsthand, to understand its significance firsthand, but also to understand its ecological significance. There'll be some more support for local reef tourism operators, covering up to 50% of the cost of necessary upgrades, checks or clearances to accommodate school visits, and $3 million for tourism tropical North Queensland. We know that Queensland is a state, and here in Western Australia we have the same experience. We know that the value of our ocean domain rests fundamentally in itself, in its own environmental condition and biodiversity, but the broader value of our oceans to us as humans, as part of human communities, goes a lot further than economic extraction, than fishing, mining and resources. It does include that significant part of Australia that includes its clean and green visitor economy that some people overlook. As I've indicated, this builds on what the Albanese Labor government has already delivered for our oceans, and it's significant. We came to office inheriting a deep backlog of environmental inaction, and we saw that as a moment of opportunity. The Minister for the Environment, Tanya Plibersek's first trip as Australia's Environment Minister in 2022 was to the second UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, where she had the privilege of meeting with President Macron. And at that time, Minister Plibersek made it clear that Australia would no longer be a reluctant player when it came to global marine conservation. Indeed, Minister Plibersek stated at that time, under an Albanese Labor government, the environment is back, front and centre. And that's exactly the approach that we've taken. Since coming to government, we've built on our national network of marine parks, which was established under the Rudd and Gillard governments, by delivering one of the largest expansions of marine protected areas in the world and in history. In 2023, we tripled the size of the Macquarie Island Marine Park, the largest contribution to ocean conservation anywhere on the planet in calendar year 2023. And last year we did it again when we quadrupled the area around the Heard and McDonald Islands, one of our most remote sub-Antarctic territories, which of course abuts the French southern and Antarctic lands, ironically made famous recently by being one of the territories captured by the new US tariff regime. Expect that was news to the penguins. But we quadrupled the size of that territory, and it was the largest act of global marine conservation in calendar year 2024. Taken together, those two acts, as we go around reviewing that national network of marine parks that the Labor government put in place between 2007 and 2013, those two acts of marine park upgrade have added more than 62 million hectares to Australia's marine park estate. And this year, we created over 7 million hectares of new highly protected areas in the South East Marine Parks network. And these contributions are critical because they secure protection for breeding grounds for millions of seabirds, seals, penguins and other marine life. Macquarie Island, as I'm sure some people in this room would know, it's the only place where royal penguins breed. It's a place where endangered albatross come to rest their giant wings after foraging for food at sea. And our government is ensuring that this remains the case so that our kids and their kids and their kids will be able to live on the same planet as these amazing creatures without having to read about them as something that used to exist. Today, thanks to the focused and timely work of our government, Australia now protects more ocean than any other country on Earth. 52% of our waters, almost double the UN 2030 target of 30%. And the most recent budget has locked in an additional $12 million in funding to enable our government to continue that work of upgrading our network of marine parks, sending a clear signal as we go into UNOC that Australia is back at the table, that Australia is serious about conservation, and we are ready to support and to enact the lifting of global ambition. Ladies and gentlemen, the discussion about ocean protection can't just be about our national marine domain. 2/3 of the ocean exists in the high seas. That domain is vast and rich, and until recently, largely unprotected. The settlement of the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, or BBNJ Treaty, and the fact that Australia was a founding signatory, and we've signed that treaty, provided a moment of celebration and satisfaction for thousands and thousands of campaigners and the dozens of civil society organisations around our country who have spent decades working towards this outcome. And I know there are some of them in the room. I see my friend Paul from around the corner in Freo. It's an achievement the Albanese government was proud to help deliver. You know, we didn't deliver it by ourselves. We delivered it at the conclusion of that incredible community-based and civil society work over a long period of time. The BBNJ Treaty is an historic milestone for the multilateral system and a critical victory for those of us who have long championed strong protections for the ocean. Australia, alongside Belize, is co-chairing the BBNJ Preparatory Commission because we want to lay the ground for the agreement's entry into force and for the first conference of the parties. This is an opportunity to work together on the implementation of this historic multilateral regime for conservation and sustainability. As Andrew said so eloquently, as he always argues so forcefully, the ocean sustains and connects us. It produces the oxygen we breathe. It moderates our climate. It's the largest source of protein on Earth. And the ocean is home to life and biodiversity that should have a safe and flourishing and unharmed vitality entirely for its own sake. In our part of the world, we're extremely mindful that protecting the ocean is vital to the peace, safety and prosperity of the blue Pacific continent. Australia has worked alongside our Indian Ocean and Pacific partners to make the BBNJ Treaty a reality, helping to safeguard our ocean for future generations. And the treaty will deliver stronger protection for the ocean, including the provisions within it for establishing marine protected areas in the high seas, which we must have, we desperately must have. It will help create an ambitious and effective system of benefit sharing from the sustainable use of the marine genetic resources of the high seas, and it will protect the interests of Indigenous peoples. Last June, Minister Plibersek tabled the treaty in the Australian Parliament to formally start Australia's domestic ratification process, and in the meantime, we will reinforce and amplify all day and every day the calls for countries to ratify the treaty as soon as possible. As part of this global effort, Australia accepted Chile's invitation to join the BBNJ First Movers Initiative, championing high seas marine protected areas. And we've announced $100,000 for a research symposium on the South Tasman Sea and Lord Howe Rise in partnership with the High Seas Alliance, Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative and WWF. From what we already know, the waters beneath the South Tasman Sea are treasured as a volcanic lost world, a world of mountains and abysses and a vast plateau known as the Lord Howe Rise, a unique landscape fully a mile below the surface. The symposium will bring together scientists, fishers, environmentalists, Indigenous representatives and government to identify areas that are biologically and ecologically significant. And this work will ensure that we're ready when the treaty comes into force, which we hope will be very soon. I look forward to Australia's focused and purposeful leadership when it comes to the high seas. And I'm very happy to confirm today that a re-elected Albanese Labor government will seek to pass the legislation to fully ratify the BBNJ Treaty as soon as possible in the next term of government. Friends, this work of environmental protection is challenging, but it's necessary. We simply can't afford to neglect the importance of principled science-based, globally cooperative protections when the pressures on our oceans are already significant and they are worsening. Here in Western Australia, we know exactly what those pressures look like, having seen the effect of severe marine heat waves this century. Dr. Forrest talked about those. You know, we are terrestrial creatures, and it's understandable that when we experience some of the unprecedented bushfire events that we've seen in this country in recent years, that we take full stock of what that means for our environmental condition and for our biodiversity. We see the impacts of climate change on the marine domain less easily because it's not the world that we live in. But some of the marine heatwave effects that we've seen here, the 2011 marine heatwave up north off Western Australia, was arguably as damaging in terms of the devastation of carbon-based flora as some of those bushfires that we've seen in the East Coast. And we need to recognise that harm that's occurring, including to our coral reef network. The Indian Ocean is vast, dynamic, and too often underrepresented in global conservation forums. And I can say that, as a Western Australian, we feel like this part of our own country isn't seen as clearly as it should be. But it does matter enormously. It's home to key biodiversity hotspots, critical fisheries, and communities that are already experiencing those sharp impacts of climate change. And that's why the Albanese government has prioritised deeper engagement in our region, in the Indian Ocean region. We've backed sustainable fisheries management, supported regional marine science, and worked with partners like Indonesia, Mauritius, and the Seychelles to combat shared threats, including marine plastic pollution, illegal fishing, and warming and acidifying waters. Through the Indian Ocean Rim Association's Blue Carbon Hub, based at the CSIRO here in Perth, Australia is building capacity to protect and restore blue carbon ecosystems throughout the Indian Ocean. This will both lift regional development and action on climate change. And we see the Indian Ocean not just as a region of strategic interest, but as a space for cooperative environmental leadership. And that's a key message that we will take to UNOC, that no global ocean agenda is complete without the Indian Ocean front and centre. Our government has also backed conservation with appropriate investment. We've committed $1.2 billion to protect the Great Barrier Reef, as you know, supporting water quality improvements, coral restoration, and research into reef resilience. And while the reef is iconic, our investments must be just as strong in local places, in places on this side of the country, like Ningaloo, Rolly Shoals, Shark Bay, Exmouth Gulf, all here in WA, all globally significant. As I said at the outset, we've also funded Indigenous ranger programs, blue carbon initiatives, and new efforts to tackle ghost nets and marine debris across Northern Australia. We continue to push for bold action on climate impacts, because from rising sea levels to ocean acidification, climate is the shadow that falls darkly and clearly across every matter of ocean health and sustainability. And that's why we have to embed climate resilience into every aspect of marine policy, domestically and globally. Friends, Australia is an ocean nation with the third largest marine estate on Earth. We sit between 3 major ocean basins. And we know that the choices we make now will shape the ocean that our children and their children inherit, and that so much of the world's environmental condition and biodiversity depends. In the Albanese government, we're proud of the progress we've made, but we're not finished yet. We're not complacent. There is still so much to do. And whether you're in Perth or Fremantle, on the edge of the Indian Ocean, we're confident that we're in the right place to help lead that conversation. So let this gathering and the conversations that you have over the next 2 days help sharpen our shared focus, lift our ambition, and carry a strong, clear, uncompromising message to Nice, that Australia will continue to be part of an appropriately energised and urgent global movement to turn the tide for our oceans. Thank you.